What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Serviceable does not happen. UAZ 3151, of course. The first thing that comes to mind is the Eternal Goat, aka UAZ 469, or rather, its late modification with the Index 3151. And for our amount you can walk from and to, from 1985 to the most recent year of release, up to 2013. Theoretically, of course, it is possible to take a Swinger Hunter, but there is no great sense in it. It will be the cars at the bottom of the market, and it usually does not lead to anything good. Moreover, UAZ will be constantly falling apart anyway, either 3151 or Hunter. It doesn't matter what year of production it is, you just have to get used to the idea. You will have to pick something in it almost always. What to look for? First of all, of course, the frame. If the UAZ has been driven on gullies in a bush, and usually it happens so, it can already lose its geometry. To hell with them, with the angles of convergence and camber, 3151 still cannot go in a straight line, but if it starts to eat rubber, it will be sad. The body can be examined for the sake of interest. There is no practical sense in it. It is rusty anyway. The main thing is not to put something on it that will prevent the car from being registered. A chandelier, for example, with a kilowatt of light, or a Kangriatnik made of pipes of indecent diameter. There's nothing to look at in the cabin either. It is in some Audi A6 C5, bought for 500,000, it is possible to get on replacement of a block of comfort for 1.5 million. In UAZ there is nothing wrong with it. There is no comfort, no block. So, nothing expensive in the cabin will not break down. There is nothing to check there either. However, in defense of the car, we can say that UAZ 3151 is a real 7-seat SUV. If, of course, folding benches in the trunk can be called seats. But it is necessary to look at the motor. First of all, it is necessary to make sure that it is the one indicated in the documents. To change the motor for a real UAZ driver is like replacing a roll of toilet paper on the toilet holder. And God only knows what kind of motor will be found during the replacement. Theoretically, there can be several motors: diesel ZMZ 5143.10 and ZMZ 51432, gasoline UMZ 414, UMZ 4178.10, UMZ 4178, ZM3, 4021.10, UMZ 4218, and so on. But since we are looking for the best option among not the oldest cars, we are likely to get a car with a 2.9-litre gasoline UMZ, minus 4218.10 with an output of 84 horsepower, or with its modification UMZ 4218 with an output of 98 horsepower. To find a common language with this motor, you will have to learn how to adjust the carburetor, and also constantly monitor the cooling system, because these engines overheat easily. From what punctured cylinder head gaskets are not rare. Taking into account that the motors often bleed oil and antifreeze, it is necessary to keep a close eye on them. However, there are those who are more fond of units from ZMZ. There is a share of common sense in it. They are assembled more qualitatively and a little more successful constructively. However, many spare parts for ZMZ are more expensive, and it is important for a real UAZ driver, because he goes to the store for spare parts all the time. Well, what UAZ should not be bought with is diesel ZMZ 514. Everything can break down in them, from fuel equipment to connecting rods and crankshaft. We will not write in detail about the transmission. Everything can fall apart there too. However, if a car with Korean 5-speed gearbox dynamos comes across, it can be considered as a good luck. Domestic gearboxes, 4-speed or 5-speed, are noticeably inferior to the Korean one in terms of reliability. UAZ 3151 is an amateur's car. It can do a lot of things off the roads, and in skillful hands even not so often fails and serves faithfully for many years. But if you want to find a car that will not break down, Kozlik will not suit you exactly. However, neither will any other frame SUV worth 500,000 rubles. Better on dry, Kia Sportage well. Now let's move on to foreign cars. Yes, there is a choice among them, though rust and other problems here will be not less than at UAZ. And to cope with them will be more expensive. But let's look at the first candidate, Kia Sportage of the first generation. Most likely, Not everyone remembers that the first Sportage was a frame. The second generation is already a typical crossover with a load-bearing body, but Sportage I in its arsenal had not only a frame, but also all-wheel drive with a rigidly connected front. However, Sportage is inferior to UAZ and many other off-roaders in terms of cross-country ability, but for not too heroic outings. To the nature, its potential is enough. The body is one of the Sportage's weak points. Even at a relatively young age, this car had actively rusted all the doors along the bottom edges, wheel arches, and almost everything, hidden under the plastic Dodger. Of course, now the condition of the bodies of most Sportage can make you teary-eyed. Often it is too late to correct the situation significantly. So, when choosing a car, the body should be seriously examined. If on UAZ you can buy new doors and other elements of tin inexpensively, in case of Sportage it will be much more difficult. The interior is the second weak point. Certainly, it seems rich by UAZ standards. Here, even in the basic configuration, there will be at least central locking, immobilizer, all-electric window lifters, GUR, and electric mirrors. But the quality of materials is not too high, and the most important thing is that there is almost no noise insulation. Add here numerous crickets, which with age settled in the salon by whole colonies, and the picture becomes not joyful at all. Besides, there is ECU hidden under the legs of the front passenger, which often simply rots there from moisture. Yes, it is better not to get into Fords on Sportage. The choice of motors is not very large. Most cars on the secondary market have a 2-litre gasoline 16-valve engine Kia fed with an output of 128 horsepower or 118 horsepower under the hood. Cars with this engine were produced at our of Toda. 2-litre 8-valve Fi with an output of 95 horsepower and Mazda diesels are very rare. It is better to avoid diesels. They are too weak, and Mazda RF sometimes cracks the blockhead. But gasoline motors are good all, especially 128 horsepower fed. They are not too powerful, but quite resourceful. Even pronounced oiling usually occurs at mileage under 300,000, earlier, rarely. Although, due to the age, the attachments can often upset, but there is nothing to be done here. Transmissions do not have any significant problems. It is clear that it is better to choose a car with MKP. Any age automatic will require serious investments. However, even 4-stage automatic transmission ASIN AW03-72LE under normal operation can please with resource of much over 200,000 mileage. The only more or less serious problem in transmission is vacuum clutches in hubs of front wheels. They have to be changed every 15 to 20,000 kilometers, and it is unpleasant. The only more serious problem is the vacuum clutches in the front wheel hubs, which have to be replaced every 20,000 kilometers. There is no rear differential lock in Russian cars, but in Korean cars in some configurations there could be a friction differential. Buying Sportage, it is necessary to be ready to the fact that it will not be possible to make UAZ in mud, and in case of breakage. It will be much more difficult and expensive to find spare parts. Comfort is also not on the height, but in general it is possible to live with this car. Its main aggregates are reliable. In any case, they were 20 years ago. Good, but expensive. Suzuki Grand Vitara I due to the fact that the Japanese have produced a huge number of Vitas, let's make it clear at once. We are talking about Suzuki Grand Vitara of the first generation, which were produced from 1997 to 2006 with restyling in 2000. Our money is quite enough for the copies after restyling, though if there is a good variant before 2000, you can take it, technically. The cars have not changed much, and everything depends on the condition of a particular copy. When inspecting the body and frame, you should realize that it is useless to expect perfect condition. The SUV is at least 20 years old. However, it is not the fastest rusting car, and despite its peculiar dreary exterior, you can try to find an almost normal-looking copy. Of course, you can't do without rust at all, as well as without rotted air conditioner tubes, but the main part of the iron for such. An age SUV can be preserved relatively well, especially in regions. The interior equipment also has a good safety margin, the remnants of which can still please the new owner a bit. Small faults like burnt-out light switch, there is no unloading relay in it, and with high current no switch lives long, of course. There will be, but it is necessary to treat it philosophically. There is no sense to chase after 3-row 7-seat version XL7, expecting to carry someone regularly on the third row of seats. You can put there only children, and the volume of the trunk is much less. However, In this version, the top two 7-litre V6 motor with 185 horsepower was installed, so if you want dynamics, you can get a 7-seat saloon as a bonus. The bulk of cars that can be bought for $500,000 will have other motors, either inline gasoline 4J20A with an output of 128 horsepower, or V6 under the Index H25A with a volume of 2.5 litres and 144 horsepower. All of them are not bad and without any significant disadvantages, but you should be ready to the fact that these engines like to eat gasoline. More precisely, to eat. And this applies not only to V6, with which you can burn up to 20 litres per 100 in the city, but also to inline motors. And replacement of timing chains in these engines is also expensive, and these chains are not eternal. Theoretically, Vitara has one 6-litre motor with belt timing, 95 horsepower, but there are practically no cars with it on sale, as there are no diesel Vitas with Mazda and PSA engines. Well, and it is not necessary, it is not our choice. There are no questions to the mechanical box, it can serve for 20 years. But with automatics, as usual, everything is more complicated. Depending on engine volume, several ASIN boxes of different series, A40, A46DE or A340E, could be used here, and there were no complaints about them. But the mileage and age of cars now is such that even these automatics have already worked out their resource, which means that at any moment they can pull out of the owner a round sum for repair, now and 200,000 rubles, far from a ceiling. If you like risk, take it. For the rest, there is MKP. In general, when buying a Grand Vitara, one thing to remember is that Vitara owners were frustrated by the cost of parts in the old days, and now it's even more frustrating. And as cars get older, their maintenance becomes more and more expensive, because the reliability with age passes, and the amount of investments grows. Not afraid of spending too much? Then do not hurry to buy Vitara. We have something more interesting. For elite, aesthetes, and masochists, Land Rover Discovery I. It is clear that to buy the first Discovery for 500,000 and to think that you have deceived the whole world, can only a person who has pink ponies and a couple of snow-white unicorns at home. But if you really want to, why not? Especially if there is a lot of money and time, and there is nowhere else to spend it. Our budget is enough even for cars of the last 1998 year of manufacture. Fresh, so to speak. Well, let's see what we will have to face. First, with the holes in the bodywork. Someone is comforted by the idea that there is a lot of aluminum in the body, but this is a very false calmness. Yes, the hood, fenders and door linings of this SUV are aluminum, but everything else is steel. So holes in the floor and even the roof are normal. And aluminum parts crumbling into white powder are also normal. It goes without saying that nobody will give you a perfectly preserved Discovery for 500,000, so before buying it, carefully study the condition of the body. The car is frame, but if there is nothing to be welded to, it is not necessary for sure. In the cabin, pay attention to the seating position. Sometimes it makes you howl, sometimes it makes you cry, and only in rare cases you enjoy it. No matter how unexpected it may look, but Discovery is first of all a serious off-roader, and only secondly, Land Rover. It was fascinating to drive on it on mud 25 years ago, but on a highway it did not please much even a quarter of a century ago. At the same time, it should be said that its interior materials were always good, and even 10 to 15 years ago it was possible to find a copy, the interior of which did not cause pity. Now it is also possible, but for quite different money. However, when you buy a 5-door car after 1994, you can count on a full electric package with high-quality music, leather, natural wood, and climate system. And let's not even suppose how much it will cost to restore all this economy to a condition close to new. The first Discovery had a lot of motors, and until now there are cars with a variety of units on sale. The most popular offer is variants with 3.5-litre V8 with 155 horsepower before restyling, with 4-litre petrol V8 with 182 horsepower and 2 and 5-litre diesel with 113 horsepower. After the restyling, the most disappointing motor is the pre-restyling V8. It has too difficult to tune carburetors, so it's better to choose the later injected V8 with a volume of 4 litres. Both V8s allow you to drive quite dynamically, but both often suffer from overheating. First of all, because of unreliable cooling system with weak radiators and tendency to leaks. And the motors themselves like to ooze oil, so their temperature regime should be taken seriously. The 2.5-litre diesel engine is hardy, but acceleration to 100 with it takes almost 20 seconds. And the traditional question, what about the fuel equipment? And also these motors do not have two resourceful turbines, but there is a pleasant moment. They are still on sale new and original. The unpleasant moment, their cost is 250 to 300,000 rubles. It will be even more difficult to decide on the gearbox. The automatic transmission here was only 4-speed, ZF4 HP22 or ZF4 HP24, and these are very good boxes. But the Discarder was not lucky with automatic transmission. First it used Mechanics LT77, and after 1995, R380. And there is no unambiguous opinion, which of them is worse. There is only an unambiguous opinion that ZF automatic is better. It is a rare case when a very old car can be advised with an automatic, even if it breaks down, or rather, when it breaks down, it is better to invest money in its restoration. It is not much cheaper to repair manual discard boxes, and it is not at all clear with what parts. Of course, Land Rover Discovery cannot be old, it can be classic. But its maintenance does not become cheaper from change of wording. For the practical, Oral Frontera A Frontera has always taken a strange position. It seems to be an off-roader and could quite replace all kinds of cruisacks and patrols for respectable uncles. But no, it couldn't. Firstly, because Opel, and secondly, it could never drive fast. Even now on the secondary market, this car is most often offered with a 136 horsepower motor and also on a stick. This car had no automatic transmissions at all. It is far from cruisack with V8. But if not to compare this SUV with Toyota, it is not so bad in itself. The first thing that is pleasing in this Opel is atypical for Opel corrosion resistance. Now it is a little late to talk about it, but still this pleasant fact about 15 years ago and now gives hope to buy not quite a corpse. Of course, it is a thin hope, but at least some hope. And the main thing is that the frame of this SUV does not rot too quickly. If the previous owners at least a little followed the metal, it can still be in relative order. That said, the VIN stamped on the frame should be checked. It may be long since unreadable. There can be even more troubles in the interior than outside. First of all, Frontera had both rather rich configurations with leather and full electric package, and quite poor ones. And taking into account that this Opel has never been distinguished by elegance, the interior of Frontera will seem quite dull in poor kits. Secondly, this car has one pronounced disadvantage, electrics. And in the interior it also regularly presents surprises. Some devices, heaters, drives, window lifters cannot work. All this can be repaired inexpensively, but if something is done from one side, something will fall off from the other. That's the Frontera's peculiarity. But by and large, the interior is quite comfortable and quiet. No complaints here. As we have already mentioned above, the most popular Frontera A motor on the secondary market is a 2.2-litre X22XE with an output of 136 horsepower. Its main problem is unreliable crankshaft and camshaft position sensors and idle speed regulator. Often there are also problems with crankcase gas ventilation. Well, and, certainly, this engine is weak for the car, although it is true for almost all Frontera motors. But it is unexpectedly economical. However, the other low-volume motors do not sin by increased appetite. 8-valve C20NE, 115 horsepower, and 2.4-litre C24NE, 125 horsepower. Incidentally, the latter two are capable of demonstrating the wonders of longevity, although the current gaskets and problems with electrics are peculiar to them. But we will not advise the 2.3-litre diesel 23 DTR, 100 horsepower. It is too weak, expensive in repair and capricious. There is no need to choose a gearbox. It will always be manual. Frontera has no interwheel locks. Differential of increased friction in the rear axle is not useful in deep mud, so this car was rarely bought for serious off-roading. And it is good, because there are much less disfigured by tuners Fronteras on sale than UAZs. And if you still do not like this car, Opel, I can understand. You can look at a Isuzu Rodeo of the first generation. It is the same car. I'll be honest. It was difficult to find at least 5-frame SUVs, which can now be bought for 500,000. But if you try, you can find something else that will be able to move somehow. For example, Great Wall Safe. By the way, many parts from Toyota 4Runner are suitable for it, so if you find safe in such a condition that somewhere on the frame there is at least some iron not eaten by rust, to which you can screw a new part, then with a certain desire you can assemble a Toyota. And seriously, with such a budget it would be better to really buy UA Zik. All 5 cars will break everything in a row, but UA Zik at least has parts for 5 kopecks per bucket. For an off-road vehicle costing 500,000, this is the most important thing. In conclusion, while the search for a frame SUV under 500,000 rubles may lead you to some 7-seater options, the reality is that reliability often takes a backseat. It's crucial to weigh the benefits of space and capacity against the potential for maintenance issues and long-term costs. Ultimately, prioritizing a balance between budget, reliability, and your specific needs will guide you toward the best choice. Remember to thoroughly research and consider all factors before making your decision. Thank you for watching, and happy car hunting.